What you just described is the ultimate excuse for everything. Like the tariffs are truly, if you think about it, the ultimate excuse for everything. So, this time was planned to be monumental change for society and civilization anyway. There was all the talk about digital currencies and central bank digital currencies, stable coin, population decline was already baked in the cards too many people, blah, blah, blah. They were going to start limiting air travel. They were going to limit consumption. They were going to limit this, that, and the other. And they were going to cause a massive contagion in the stock markets / financial markets around the world to bring in and usher in this new system. If you bring in these tariffs here, this is the one thing that ties it all together. Because now the tariffs are also another excuse for the shipping crisis. The shipping crisis is next for anybody who's not out there and doesn't have the feelers out.
Welcome to another edition of Tradcat Night, special guest exclusive podcast right here on the tradcatnight.org website. Again, we've got David Dubine returning to the program. What the food supply is looking like these days. And by the way, I thought I saw someone blew up, was it a trailer that was bringing over like a ton of eggs? And I can't remember where it was, but someone literally blew it up. It's like the new mafia front business, the egg cartels. But welcome back to the show, and what's been happening?
Appreciate you having me back. I am on my fertilization list for my orchard and getting all of our food production coming from the ground to our fingers on our own property. There's a lot of talk about food disappearing, and I get it. But your first line of defense against that is your own food production at your own residence or around you somewhere. So we're going to be putting in extra sweet potatoes. We got a little anxious jumping the gun, and luckily we didn't lose all of our plantings of the tomatoes and the peppers and all these things. We were able to cover most of it over the freezes. But think about food production or wild foraging right where you're at, where some super easy ones to catch in the spring, because next spring will be next spring and you can catch the same ones again. Start identifying the plants around your area, because it does look like, food's going to get, let's say, way more expensive. And a lot of countries are going to stop sending it here because of this. So we're going to have two different dogs nipping at our heels on this.
Good stuff, buddy. I mean, personally, with you, what you been up to? What you been keeping busy? You're still in Tennessee. How's the weather been down there? I mean, I thought some areas in Tennessee got whitewashed with that last atmospheric river thing that happened.
Yeah, they had some of the biggest floods they'd ever had, from Nashville west out to Memphis. And then Ohio River coming into the Mississippi River filled up, and then everything subsequently from there was just getting raging river torrent form, filling up the Mississippi right along in that area coming through Memphis. Also massive floods. But we got cold over here a couple nights where all the fruit blossoms, fruit blooms, whatever, got tossed and frozen off the trees, whatever, didn't make it through that 2 weeks of warmth. So nature's throwing things at us, and now politics is throwing things at us. So when I say that, I really mean anybody out there, you're going to have to start thinking about victory gardens and pulling the clock back a little bit to the way we used to do it, say, 2 generations ago, compared to this globalized, getting fruits out of season, kind of never-ending supply chains. That is rapidly grinding to a halt. And it's planned, Eric. It's planned. Because if you go back to 1976 and we find the Lima Declaration, Lima, Lima, Peru, Lima Declaration, the whole deindustrialization had been part of that plan anyway to bring us to where we sit right now, taking away the industrial might of the industrial powers after World War II and thinning that out and allowing what was then third world nations to accrue technology and more equal distribution of the wealth. And that's pretty much come to its fruition. It's rolled its course. Now, the new 2025 to 2050 plan from the same planners of that are bringing us back away from globalization down into localization / continentalization.
Never get left out in the cold. There is never a reason to ever let you or your family suffer. Instafire and Civilization Cycle are on a mission to make fire starting and off-grid living easy for everyone. You shouldn't have to be a mountain man to strike a flame and make a fire anytime, anywhere.
So the shipping crisis shall be on our doorstep, along with the force majeure non-delivery of airplane parts to limit your air travel. And we could start to see a lot of things that were Agenda 2030 driven are also put into this 2025 to 2050 agenda here. It's more of a 25-year period of change that's planned versus just a single date that everybody's looking at.
Glad you mentioned. I actually just recovered the 2045 strategic social initiative that started over there in Russia. So it was quite interesting to kind of rehash that topic. But yeah, a lot of people get caught up on the whole Agenda 2030 thing. But I'm like, dude, there's so much more to the program than just what they have for 2030. Not meaning to undermine Agenda 2030, but there definitely is a whole lot more on their palette past that. But get back to the tariffs and tying it into stock market. Again, since the last time you and I talked, it's been like a mini roller coaster ride with that. Some people claiming market manipulation, some of the oligarchs making even more money while others are losing monies. I'm not quite sure where we're at. What are you expecting here in the not so distant future? You've had some big names come out and say when all is said and done, it's going to be an 80% drop. I forget what the one CEO who accurately predicted the 2008 crash, I forget what his name was, but that's what he is saying. I have said I thought it'd be like around 50 or something percent, so it's even more than what I have suggested. But what does it all mean in the end, and what does it look like, on the post side, like practically speaking, for the everyday person listening to this program? What do stores look like, and how soon?
Well, we're going to do an inverted pyramid on the answer. And what you just described is the ultimate excuse for everything. Like the tariffs are truly, if you think about it, the ultimate excuse for everything. So this time was planned to be monumental change for society and civilization anyway. There was all the talk about digital currencies and central bank digital currencies, stable coin, standard, and all these things moving in the direction. Population decline / depopulation agenda, whatever you like to term that as, was already baked in the cards too many people, blah, blah, blah. They were going to start limiting air travel. They were going to limit consumption. They were going to limit this, that, and the other. And they were going to cause a massive contagion in the stock markets / financial markets around the world to bring in and usher in this new system. Each and of those parts, it doesn't really accomplish the goal of the other part. They're sort of semi-related, but I mean, if you look at the whole tapestry, if you just tore the corner of the tapestry, i.e. Some depopulation thing, did it really rip down the stock market and cause such a contagion that we need to come into a new global monetary system? No. But if you bring in these tariffs here, this is the one thing that ties it all together. Because now the tariffs are also another excuse for the shipping crisis. The shipping crisis is next for anybody who's not out there and doesn't have the feelers out. You can't stop this much global trade and all these trinkets of junk coming across the oceans without triggering massive spillbacks on the nations importing or exporting. Okay, that's a given. And then that goes into the shortages and the price rises, and you can walk that chain down. But all these companies that operate shipping fleets, from Maersk to Evergreen and all, that's just two examples. All of these break bark carriers, bulk good carriers. I mean, all these ships are going to stop moving across the oceans, and those ships are valued on the stock market in some country somewhere on the amount of cargo that they're moving back and forth. So now we come into a shipping crisis, and imagine if it would be that, you can see how it works. Shipping crisis, these ships aren't working. They're sitting dry docked for 2, 3, 4 years. Oh, we can't get them back out. They're rusty buckets now. And then whoosh, the entire shipping fleet shrinks down to like 20% of what it was here right now. Like, this is really, truly the one all-encompassing, all-end-all excuse for everything that's about to happen and is happening. The tariff, the trade wars. It all comes back to the same exact top of the pyramid right there.
So much happening, man. What do you make of? How do you assess Trump so far through the first 4 months now? Almost 4 months? No, would it be 3 months? 3 months, I think.
Oh, man, it's super simple for me. He's just here to see the bankruptcy and oversee the bankruptcy proceedings of the United States. Nothing more, nothing less. I mean, yeah, that was the best choice other than full-blown communism, moving that direction. Like that whole crew that was in charge of whatever happened to our country in those 4 years. The only choice that you would go with that direction was if you wanted communism. And I know a lot of people, they have this sort of romanticized idea of, it'll work. And it never worked in history. And I've never met anybody who ever lived in these countries really want to have that. It's a dictatorial top-down system where people disappear at just the smallest of utterances. You don't want that, and people who've lived through it and then it's transitioned to another system never want to go back to it. It's not something they seek out again. Once you've gone through it, you realize what a terrible decision that was. But the romanticized Western version of it, where it hasn't happened here and you haven't been rounded up or starved out because of this meritocracy, they were just pulling people that didn't know how to do anything into ranks, and you saw things already starting to collapse. And that's what it was all about, too. It was so inefficient. The inefficiencies in a communist system is just ridiculous. That's why there's always famines. That's why nothing ever works. That's why your electricity always turns off. That's why, nothing is ever reliable. Ports don't work. Roads don't work. Bridges always collapse. Rails are defunct. Energy production systems don't work because they never train anybody. And you just get up because daddy knew my daddy, and I'm in the top position, but I will never train as an electrical engineer, but I'm supposed to be running the energy department. Jeez, come on. This is what happens. So that choice of that is 0% chance. So knowing that we were coming into a never-ending money printing side of things, and we could never pay it back, and you can only kick the can for so long. And all these people started buying gold, and that was the trigger that, it's changed now. The whole gold buying spree started like 2 years ago. You knew it was coming to an end at that point. Anybody who had eyes to see over 4,000 years of history knew when these central banks went super deep, not knee deep in gold, but like, 6-story building deep in gold, that they were changing over to a gold-backed system, at least for part of it. And then you marched in on these real-world asset declarations, and BlackRock now going to digitize 10 trillion, I think, of assets here, at least in the United States. And there's others that are working with BlackRock across the world. And I think so far they've pledged in like 32 trillion. We could have risen by today. These things are moving so fast. But last count I had globally, at least just smashing easy to like economic headline numbers together, there's about 30, let's call it even 30 trillion of assets that were going to be put on and taken under the wing of real world asset overseen by BlackRock and BlackRock subsidiaries and banks that are the largest of banks that are all pushing in on this operation. That all came before Trump even was talking about the tariffs. So you could see the huge pendulum was already swinging in a different direction. It just needed the ultimate excuse to bring everything into this, to put all, it's almost like cooking. Now you can put all the ingredients into the kettle. All we need is like eye of bat, leg of newt to go into this thing, tail of a newt or whatever to complete it. But we're that close, man.
Let's circle back to the weather here. I saw a few people on X. What are those people called? Meteorologists, and they were talking about how this is going to be a doozy of a finish here in the Midwest and going into the Southeast in regards to potential tornadoes. And I was just kind of looking at the overall general map. I'm not in the red area, not in Tornado Alley per se, but it does look like it's going to be seasonably cooler in my area and wetter or whatnot. But what are you prognosticating here as we move along?
I'm trying to pull up real time here off climate.gov the La Nina forecast here on the threshold. So if you want to do just a quick glance in history of the past, La Nina for the rest of the spring is where we're going to be at. That shows more moisture in some areas, less moisture in others. And you can look up all the maps. This is really a well-established science. They've been doing this since the early 1900s. More than 120 years this science has been studied. And crop traders and those on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange that take physical delivery of their crops follow this religiously. This is how they go long or short, depending on if they feel they're going to get quite good conditions for growing or if they're going to get atrocious conditions, need to cover themselves so they can at least pay their loans back, right? So anybody out there, I would encourage you to look at the La Nina pattern through the next 6 months, and that is exactly what we're going to experience. So wherever your area is in the U.S., that will affect you in terms of it will be drier or wetter, cooler. So that's a pretty much no-brainer there to pick that one out. But there are some abnormally warm conditions squeezing through Asia right now. What does it have to do with longer-term cycles? That, they keep pointing, all they'll do is talk to their blue in the face about, it's record this, it could be a record. Okay, great. Well, when's the last time those records were done? Like right now in Korea, for example, they have the cherry blossoms out, the Cherry Blossom Festival. And the last time it snowed during a cherry blossom festival was 1907. Well, that's the centennial minimum when we went into really low solar activity and weather patterns changed. So for them to come out on headlines right now and go, "Oh, it's snowing," well, yeah, it did that in 1907. So we're looking at at least a 100-year cycle, right around a century-long cycle here. But nobody talks about that. They just want to point to how abnormal it is. Well, it's abnormal at least once in 100 years. But since we've seen it before, then there's something to it on a 100-year cycle. Nobody wants to put that two and two together because then it blows global tax thing out of the water, right? You can't have that. And the whole thing about cherry blossoms, too, these ridiculous reports coming out of Japan, trying to get everybody to believe that the cherry blossoms are blooming 2 weeks earlier than they ever have, even since the 1600s. Yeah, but if you look at the urban heat island effect in the population in the cities where these blooms bloom early, it's 100% correlation nearly with the population, with the motors, with the heat island effect of pavement and buildings, into that extra little bit of warmth that it gives those cherry blossoms in those local areas. But when you do an overall average of the entire country that's not been industrialized, or there's no neighborhood building or city building around these cherry blossom areas, they remain the exact same as they have since the 1600s. The only place they're blooming earlier is in the habitation centers. So then again, they don't want to split the hair on that. They're just headlines are running with cherry blossoms are blooming 2 weeks earlier. Well, yeah, only in select locations like Kyoto, for example. The city's grown tremendously since World War II. And you look at other places as well across Japan that have urban centers that have sort of encapsulated around to or gone right to the edge of these cherry blossom orchards, cherry orchards. Look at it for what it is. And now the cycle is starting to repeat. We're absolutely coming into the bare minimum of a 100-year cycle. I would dare say 400 to 2,000 year, because all that extra rainfall across the Sahel in North Africa is back again. And that sure hadn't been here since 400 years at the minimum. So, why does nobody want to talk about the cyclic activity of all these changes we're seeing? Eric, it's going to get rough, man. It's going to get really, really rough moving point. I think that's why the distraction's here, because we're at the point where it can no longer be hidden. The tariff wars also explain away a lot of the food shortages coming. Okay, that's all right, but that's exported, imported stuff from another country. But like we're having right now with the tariffs, Europe's cut us off, said no more fish, no more seafood, no more beef, no more chicken. Okay, cool. That'll all stay back in the United States. Groovy. So some of our food prices should come down. Now, is that not also the perfect excuse to get food back in on a continental basis versus shipping it overseas? I think it is. I mean, the more I go, the more ultimate excuse this thing checks every single box for everything that's happening right now. The tariffs have initiated this thing, whatever it is. It's all tariff initiated. So whoever had this grand plan chessboard thing had to have the ultimate excuse to move everything and have the ultimate excuse for everything that is occurring right now when the populace became aware out of their own eyes that the food wasn't growing normally. And I think we've come to that point now where they can no longer mask the crop losses. I've done a bunch of research on that. I don't know if we talked about it last time. I was using Grok to front run and go out and find me all the news headlines around every single nation that they had 20% crop losses or greater of grains in every region on the planet. And I am 3 months ahead of the USDA, and we're looking at least 4 or 5% down on every grain across the planet. So now what?
Right. Now what? Well, as you and I both been saying, get as prepared as possible. We're going to do a long show tomorrow with the Provident Prepper duo team, so it'll be like probably a full hour with them. But what would you say now to buy in on across the board, whether it is precious metals, whether it is just general products? I know I've really been going back to the basics with water and making sure I'm really rotating on the food and moving that stuff out first. But we'll give some advice here on the prepping side. What would you be buying in now before the big crash?
Well, let me tell you about Pastor Brandon Biggs here for a second. I'm really not so much watching into these religious shows as such, but there's a couple people who've nailed it a few times on different calls on things that have come to fruition. This dude's one of them. So he was talking about in December 2024 that he had a vision that he saw empty shelves that had cobwebs on them, which indicated like a longer term sort of slowdown. And then Amazon just this week is cutting all shipments from China. And an enormous amount of supplies. If you watch this latest video I did, I got 5 or 6 screen grabs from Reddit groups and over on Twitter, X, that People are refusing shipments because the taxes actually cost. One guy got a $2,200 worth of aluminum parts, and they wanted $3,700 or whatever for import duty. He's like, I can't do that, man. So he sent them back, and he's like, I'm defunct. I'm officially out of business. A huge amount of companies are calling force majeure right now, which means act of God. But then on the litigation side, they're saying, well, you can't do that because you knew Trump was going to pull some of this. And the whole thing about equalizing trade barriers, so you guys can't call force majeure because you already knew that was a possibility. So it wasn't out of the blue like a lightning bolt act of God that came out of nowhere. You guys knew that disruptions in trade was possible when Trump came in. So you can't use that force majeure card. So now there's litigation against all these companies calling force majeure, which means they are not delivering at all. So it depends really where you're getting your supplies from. If you're getting your preps or whatever from an American company producing in America, and I know there's still some, but not a lot. There's some. That should not be disrupted, but their order volume is going to increase greatly. But if you're getting anything from China or anything outside the realms of the United States, you're going to have to think about your short list. Like maybe you have a specialized diet. Maybe you have children and they're getting infant formula. Maybe you have special medication. And most of the meds, the base ingredients are produced in China. So, you start to add all these things up. It's not really one answer that you can give for that. And, Brandon Biggs, when he's talking about it's going to be a protracted reduction in goods on the shelves, where he was saying at the end of the vision, what he could see was, like, let's say you're in a pretty big city and there's 10 Walmarts, for example. He's like, there weren't enough goods on any one of them to keep them open, so they consolidated into one store and they closed the rest. All right, so this is the kind of thing that you could envision happening. But where are you getting your supplies from? Like your food source, are you getting it locally? Or are you still relying on something brought in from 1,000, 2,000 miles away from a different country? That buying habit needs to change. So it's not about a single thing to look at in terms of prepping or in terms of, what's the one thing? It's like, where's the destination it's coming from? And then you can determine your urgency of purchasing that. And everybody's needs will be a little different. Like for me, we're banging out to some estate sales this weekend to go look for more tools and plates and different things that we think that we might need over if you come into a protracted. Let's think about Great Depression. It was a good 4 years after the bond crisis of 33. You had the massive stock market crash in 29. That didn't really recover, and then they tried to remonetize everything, and then you got that bond debacle handed in 33, 34. That was a good 4 years, man. If we get 4 years of no delivery from China or 4 years of completely disrupted trade, man, things will go bare on the shelves. And, there's nothing to replenish it. Everything's made for this landfill economy. Nothing's meant to last. So how good are you at repairing stuff? More for me, if you're going to go ask the specific, what I would buy is things for repairing other items, so whatever that might be, from motor parts to washers, dryers, and any of the kind of thing that you think's an integral in your life. You're going to need to repair that thing.
Two is I like buy at least two of something. Like if I know I need something and I know I'm going to need it longer term, which you're basically explaining here, I at least get a pair of something, if not more, of something, because I don't know if it's going to be available at what price down the road or whatnot. And especially with the tools and stuff. I'm glad you mentioned that too, because I know like a couple times a year, that's why I'll just specifically go out and think about potential problems, and or even if it's something that I don't need personally, maybe it's something in my community that someone might need that I could barter or something. You know what I mean? So I'll go out like at least 2 times a year and just do that, just going out and getting different tools. And obviously my setup is different than yours. I don't have a homestead or land like that, so you're going to have a lot more of an inventory than I do. But I do think that's important, like you said. And the main thing for me is like every night, and I'm telling you, a lot of people think I'm joking around with this. Just about every night, I sit down for a good 15 minutes and try to think of potential problems. Go through my inventory, see what I don't have, and then, like you said, whatever you don't, you got to make that, prioritize that and have that sense of urgency and go and get it before, the next variables come in. Here's some breaking news, by the way, on the earth changes fronts. Southern California rocked by a decently strong earthquake, at least according to the USGS, about almost a 5.5 in San Diego area. But just wanted to throw that in there.
Talk to me when that's an 8.0 earthquake. 5.5 really in the scheme of everything is very, very small. So, for news to come out and go, there's a 5 in California. Dude, you're sitting on the San Andreas Fault. Come on, man. That's one of the biggest fault lines on the planet. And for a 5.5, that should not even be newsworthy except in the local area. 7, 8, 8.5, yeah, I'll give it to you and be like, ooh, that was a big one, Like the Myanmar large one, 7, 7, 8, like that. Okay, that was significant across China and Thailand and Myanmar. But beyond that, a 5.5 in California. Oh, wait, we spotted a whale in Hawaii. Okay, during whale season. Wow, is that news or is it like, whatever, that's normal?
What would be more concerning if you thought like maybe thousands of or hundreds of earthquakes like that during a short period of time? That might be a little alarming, but yeah.
Yeah, or earth cracks. Like you get like a 5-mile long earth crack that's 300 feet wide, that just opens up suddenly. That would be newsworthy for me. Like giant earth crack, a quarter-mile wide that's running for 100 miles. Like that's significant. Like seriously. South Carolina, though, has a fault line that only goes off every so often. It's a very small one, but it's a very damaging one. But it's been responsible for some massive quakes on about a 400-year cycle.
They just found one up in Minnesota, too. I remember doing a report on that over the last 5 to 10 years. It's like on one of their major, or on the major highway, whatever the major highway is, like in Minnesota, they just found a major fault line that's starting to crack and split open.
Oh, do they? Yeah, there's all these mini fault lines all over the United States that haven't gone off. There's one under us here, too, in East Tennessee. Hasn't gone off for 200 and some years. Eric, let me add on to that. Again, coming with the awareness of humanity that we have entered a new cycle of electromagnetism and the ability to grow crops and the throw off of plant and harvest dates. We're seeing significant earth rifting and cracking across so many areas. If you go to the Rift Valley, well, that was rifting and it sort of slowed down quite a bit, but as of late, it is just going gangbusters, widening, lengthening. We've seen it in Mexico. And then this latest one, I saw these images coming out of Myanmar. That's a significant shifting of our Earth's crust there. So as we start to see these things happening in unison across, all those three are happening in unison. So if you start to look at it, why is it suddenly there's this uptick in earth cracking, rifting in the beginning of new volcanoes and steam vents and sulfur vents coming out of these areas that there weren't before? And the amount of eruptive activity is increasing, and the amount of what they call punch through new volcanoes, that literally there's a field, farmers see smoke coming out of it, and then in Indonesia, boom, a new volcano just starts in the middle of a field that wasn't there before, and it's starting to grow, and then you got more ash, and suddenly you see 100-foot tall cinder cone, and then another month goes by and it's 200 foot, and that's the beginning of a new volcano. What is it with these punch through events that we're starting to see in the crust? That should be another thing people are asking, because our ability to grow crops is pretty much at its edge right now. People are aware. So you needed this one giant excuse to cover all of this so humanity doesn't see it, because they will absolutely act in a different way that's not controllable if they understand. We're allowed to give this information out because our reach is small. But how many people, if it was on the nightly news on the front page of every paper and magazine continuously for months across the entire world's news feed to tell you this, it would disrupt society before the event were to occur. It's in its amplification phase of never coming back again. We ain't going back. Humpty Dumpty's broken, and the rest of the world's about seeing it, feeling it, and now that excuse, that scatter wave of just numbness needs to come across with a million excuses why everything is just going off the rails. And I come back to the tariff, and it's a perfect time for it. If you're looking for signals, man, this is a sign. This is a signal that something has changed. It's not the single event. It is a signal of the event. Anyway, thanks for letting me chat today. Civilizationcycle.com, our website that connects right to our Thursday night radio program, broadcast live on Rumble, Adapt 2030 channel, and the Civilization Cycle channel.